Welcome to today's episode of the Confidence and Connection podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by the Mother of Mental Loads. Trigger warning, this episode will discuss paediatric health and mental health.
I'm Mia. I turned 30 last month.
Ooh, happy birthday.
Yeah, it's been a big month and keep saying everyone, I'm going to Fiji for my birthday for a couple of weeks, which will be amazing. I have two little boys. So Leo is 3. He turned 3 last month as well. So he's a May baby. And Kieran, he's turning 1 in 2 weeks. So
will you be in Fiji for that?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
what a first birthday.
Yeah. I think he's going to take his first steps there too, which is pretty cool. When I was a kid, I took my first steps apparently under the Eiffel Tower. So I'm like, he's just going to...
Following Mum's footsteps.
That'd be pretty
literally,
cool.
figuratively.
Yeah, I know, exactly. That's me. So my story doesn't start with me. It starts with my son as such, our family. So my eldest son, Leo, he's just turned 3. But he looks the same size or age as like an 18-month-old. I know when you met him, you were like, oh, and don't worry, every single day we meet anybody new, they're so confused.
I felt so bad when I was like, oh, is he 18 months? And you're like, no, he's 3. And you handled it so well. Like, I can imagine that for some parents it might not be the easiest thing to deal with, but you're like, no, like, it's fine. I felt terrible though, but you just took it in your stride and kept going. So it was,
I think we're learning to navigate that because, I mean, he's adorable. He really is. He's beautiful
so
curly
cute.
hair, right? Like, you know, he's my kid, but I can tell you, like, he's very cute. But that plus he's very switched on for a 3-year-old. So people just get so confused.
Yeah.
And so they're drawn to him, and there's always this conversation, which can be a positive one, but sometimes it's like, okay, here we go again.
Yeah.
But because up until a few months ago, we didn't know why he was so small.
Yeah.
That was a harder conversation because we were in sort of this medical journey of understanding that I'll tell you about. But up until then, that was a bit more like, okay, how do we nicely tell somebody he's a little bit older? And it was this, try to figure out, some people would be like, oh, my kid should be doing more at that age. But then, so almost like feeling guilty that their kid hadn't got there. And it was this confusing thing of like, no, guys, it's okay. Like, he's 3. Yes, he's just a pocket rocket. He's awesome, but you don't have to try and compare him. And I think also for me, like this beautiful community we have out here. So we run play groups. And I attend a lot of play groups and events and stuff. And so we see a lot of the same age kids every week. And so until we knew what was going on, I was just seeing these kids start to grow and grow and grow. And while my son was still kind of keeping up with them in terms of like socially, that sort of stuff, you could just, you know, when the kids start growing like weeds, he wasn't. And so that's...
So he's always been small? Was he small from birth? Or?
Yeah, look, he was a smaller kid. He was 2.9 kilos. He was 2.5 weeks early, but they were really happy with everything. He got like the 9 on the APGAR score and stuff, everything. The whole pregnancy looked great, all looked really normal. He looked like the average sized kid. So when he came out early, they just thought, you know, he could have had another couple of weeks to bake.
Yep.
So he was so tiny. We've looked at photos since and like seeing photos of him compared to Kieran, our youngest, who was growing fine. We're like, holy dooly, he was he was just a little tiny baby. So really scrumptious. But just to begin with, the first year, he was always smaller, but he was kind of staying on the trajectory of being smaller. And that's okay. I didn't have the greatest supply, so there was, you know, those fun like first mum things where you're trying to figure out, is it my supply? So we were mixed feeding, and that did help. But then he started solids, and his weight was still kind of staying okay. But height, he'd always been smaller. And then around the 12 to 18 month mark is when... So I understand now why growth charts are so important, because the reason that they've caught on to it is because he was doing this thing of kind of going on a growth chart, still on the bottom of the percentile, but that's fine. And then his growth just started dropping. So he'd never lost weight, but he pretty much just like ground to a halt with his growth. And so between the age of 12 and 18 months is when the doctors definitely started paying attention, and at that age, they're pretty good to just keep monitoring and see is there something going on. You know, it could, they call it kind of, what do they call it? Where they said, we might wait till 2 because sometimes they do start growing after 2. So our GP had referred us after she was like, don't like this. Let's just send you back to the pediatrician you saw, you know, at the hospital. So he did some bloods and looked at his stuff and went, he is quite small. We can see he's, there's something there. So let's try. He said, like, Pediasure. So we started Pediasure. His iron levels weren't crazy low, but they were on the lower side of normal. So, like, here's this revoltingly ironly smelling supplement. But here it is. Give that to him. We'll see if that helps his appetite. Because he also didn't really have an appetite. And I know a lot of people say, like, toddlers are picky. They are. But for Leo, it's just this gut feeling. I think we both had, my husband and I were just like, it's not that he's picky. It's that he's not hungry. So when he would get hungry, he'd eat whatever. He wasn't that fussy. But it was just, oh, my God, the fight. Like, looking back now, the constant mental load of trying to keep him fed and trying to keep his weight up and trying to do this and trying to do that. Like, at the time, we just kept on keeping and we were coping. But, reflecting now, it's like, ooh, that was a journey in itself, like, before we even knew that there was something really that wrong.
Yeah.
So I think it was about a year ago that we saw the pediatrician properly. That's right, because Kieran was 2 weeks old. So I was still at home with him, and then Liam went and took Leo to the pediatrician. And he ran us through that, the kind of, okay, let's start this, the Pediasure and the supplements. Come back in October and we'll give you a blood test to do. And so he got him to do all of these much more like in-depth blood tests. We had no clue what any of them really meant other than like, the usual, how you see like THS or TSH, I can't even remember them, but all these different things to check off all these little bits. And then also a bone age scan. So we just had to go get an x-ray for his left hand. So when we saw that x-ray, we're like, looks like a hand. Sweet. No clue what to make of it. And so I don't think we really thought that there would be much more other than maybe it was nutrition based, even though we were doing our best, and that he was picky and that eventually he would grow. But we went, I went back in October, and we'd obviously not really thought about it at all because my husband usually would either call in or he'd come to the appointments. But this one, I took our baby and Leo and we went to the pediatrician, and then I didn't call my husband in or anything because he was busy. And afterwards I was like, well, fuck. Because he was like, oh, okay, so he's not growing very well and his growth hormone levels are non-existent. In the nicest way possible. He might have this condition, so we'll send you to an endocrinologist. And we're like, an endo what? And some people might know what that is because things like diabetes and any sort of hormonal issues, you go to an endocrinologist. But yeah, for us, we're like, sorry, what? We've never dealt with that.
Particularly in babies as well. Like it's completely different adult hormones and then children's hormones, so that's a whole new, and it's your baby. It's not just like the hormones of you, it's your baby. And it again on reflection, it was one of that things where I left the appointment, I was like, okay, cool, and told my hubby, we've been referred to this specialist, and then we started Googling, and it's like, oh, okay, I mean, it makes sense because all of these things he's kind of like ticking those boxes, but shit, like that's a bigger thing. And at the time we thought that's all that was wrong. And so luckily in Australia, we're really, really lucky to be in Australia because the government does help pay for a lot of the supplements and the treatments if your kid does get have the issue that he has. In America, families basically go broke. Like they have to try and get it through their insurance, and then if they move jobs, like it's it stops coming. So we are really lucky how we've been able to kind of go from one specialist to the other. And then there were a couple of months waiting, but in hindsight, it's like, okay, it felt like a long time, but it was good to get on top of it. So that was October. And then we got an appointment with the endocrinologist in November. I think it was a month later. And I think I didn't mention was the bone age scan. He had his hand, his bones were a year younger than him. So that, I was like, oh, that's kind of concerning. But the pediatrician was like, oh, no, that's actually a good thing because it means that medically if he's like a slow grower, he has more time to fill into his body. If his bones were the same age as him, it means that he would most likely be like short for life, which is fine. It's not really the height issue. It's for us, we found out it's the other stuff. But that's how they're able to kind of tell and why they do that test to go, okay, so
his body's still slowing, like it's really slowly growing compared to how old he is.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing the letters and stuff they'd write about him. It was lovely. It was like, otherwise he's a really happy, healthy, engaged kid. And we knew that, like, and that's what we just like love about him. He's just a little firecracker and he's so unique, like really, really cool. But it was just this constant thing of like our kid's not growing. Like in my mind, once I got the diagnosis, I felt this relief of being like, okay, it wasn't my fault. Because as the mum carrying the baby, like, what have I done wrong? Thankfully, we're able to figure out that wasn't really anything we could do.
Yeah.
A bit of a like glitch in the DNA matrix as such between my husband and I. But all of that stuff going around in my brain was just going and going and going for nearly 3 years until we got the diagnosis. So to get where we got with his diagnosis and understand it fully, you have to go through quite a lot of more blood tests and an MRI, and then also the big blood test, which was, they call it the STIM test. It was like an 8-hour day, and he'd had to fast from the night before, which for us, luckily, he's not really that hungry.
True.
Like, he doesn't get hungry. So, you think of, like, other kids that are like, oh, my God, give me food as soon as I wake up. Like, our youngest. Like, he's like, give me, where's my food? Not that he can speak, but that's what he pretty much says.
They cry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, give us the food.
Scream,
Yeah. But with Leo, like, we had to be his reminder to eat, and up until that point.
Yeah.
Which was a fine line between, like, making him so sick of food because we're trying to, like, coax him, but also trust that his body knows that he needs to eat.
Yeah.
Fucking fine line. Anyways, Pediasure was pretty handy during those days because, especially when they get sick, like during the flu season, his appetite was pretty much zero. So at least, didn't love having to give that to him, but at least that kind of kept him going. Anyway, so the MRI and the STIM test end up happening at the Children's Hospital, which love them. They're so good. We got to deal with them.
That Lady Salento?
So it's the one next to Marta. Yeah, I think that is... I don't know the full name, but the Children's Hospital right next door to Marta. So you kind of walk down the road. Yeah. It's beautiful. Like, the actual hospital is just so kid-friendly and so family-friendly. And seeing, like, the day that he had that blood test, seeing all the teachers that were sitting there with the kids that was in the cancer ward and seeing them and being able to have schooling and stuff was just... We have a lot of good support here, so we're really grateful for that. But being in that environment is really interesting. Yeah. But over that day, we had Captain Starlight come a couple of times for performances and just the most amazing nurses and doctors. And so we did that blood test where he had to get blood draws every 15 minutes for 4 hours. Yeah. And he was such a trooper. It was only until the end of those 4 hours where he started getting really tired that he was really starting to crash. But like, this is an almost 3-year-old that once they finally got the cannula in, he was like, oh, look, that's my blood. And found it so cool. And kids always say, oh, I'm going to be this when I grow up. But I think he's had a really good experience with doctors and nurses that maybe one day he might head down that path. Wouldn't surprise us at all. So that blood test is pretty hectic. It has to be done in a hospital because their blood sugars can drop really drastically and that can be dangerous. And he had to have the IV drip kind of going the whole time. Anyways, that was done, so that was great. We got those two done. It was a bit of a shit show for the mums to get there because they couldn't get the cannula in the first time the other hospital, so that's why we got transferred. But that got done, and before that we'd found out from the MRI what was wrong, like structurally, or how his brain was made and the bits up there. So we kind of knew that we were in for at least the growth hormone treatment and that he would fail that test. And failing that test was a good thing for us getting the PBS. Not a good thing that he failed so drastically. Because he failed really badly. But it meant that rather than us having to fork out about, I think it's about 40 grand a year for treatment, it's just $30 for a pen, which I think it's like ends up being $30 a month because we kind of use one pen or one or two pens across the month. So completely like took away a few zeros, which is insane. So we're happy to hear that that we could get him qualified for that.
Yeah.
So we thought the growth hormone was the main thing. His pituitary gland showed that it was congenitally really small. So it was too small to be producing enough of the hormones on its own. And so by the sounds of it, he got a lot of the stores he needed for the first year or so from me. And then those stores started depleting when his body was trying to grow. So that was the reason. It's his body wasn't growing, so it was good to get that answer, but it was also a bit of a shock of going, oh, okay. So you couldn't see those in the scans. If we didn't know what to look for it, during pregnancy, we wouldn't have changed a thing as such. But it has this whole situation. You have to kind of, if we wanted any other kids, we'd have to consider that. But yeah, so hearing that there was something that wasn't made quite right made sense. The rest of the brain looked great, so we thought that, like, you could tell he's epic. But the poor thing, his body wasn't producing the right hormones, and you could tell that he couldn't keep up with his peers and like his stamina and his energy. He slept a lot, which is a great thing, but it's also when they got older, like, you could just see he was just so tired and very much a fight or flight mode for him for smaller things. So we found that out, and then the growth hormone treatment. Thyroid levels were really low, so he started thyroid meds before we had any of these tests, and already we saw just like his whole demeanor change. He was happier. His stamina. I think we realized what a real toddler was like. Having to burn his energy was great. So it was awesome to see that. But then that growth did cut. He had like a little, I think it was 100 or 200 gram growth spurt. And we're like, yes, like, it's gonna work. But his body went, oh, hold on. The other hormones are really low, so it helped with his general well-being, but his growth still kind of slowed down. So once we got the growth hormone diagnosis, that was great. But the thing that got thrown in there right at the end, which is probably the most important thing for us now, is that's changed how we have to do things, is that his cortisol levels are impacted as well. So he is steroid dependent, which means that something like a broken arm could be deadly for him if, say, he was in the park on his own and nobody was with him. So obviously, until he's old enough to understand that, we can't leave him there. But understanding that that's how much it could impact him was obviously a bit terrifying. Again,
is there a window? Like, if he was to break an arm, you'd need him, get him to the hospital in an hour. So obviously the faster the better, but
we've been asking the nurse and doctor to explain this. So they've given us like a chart of. It's like an if this, then that. So it gives you an idea of the worst things, like, say, a burn or a break, and what to look for. And when those signs start kicking in, we have emergency shots that we have on our persons all the time, and we've been shown how to use those, and we just administer those. Ambulances carry, like, all the ambulances in Australia are carrying them. So I think overseas it'd be a similar thing.
So is his cortisol high or low?
It's low. He's like adrenally, it's really insufficient. So he's steroid dependent because of those cortisol levels. But I think it weirdly kind of works almost in an opposite way, that his body just goes into shock. And he's at risk of having like a heart attack or blood sugar drop. So that's why in a situation where, a kid with a normal endocrine system would break their arm and it would be painful, and they probably would feel a bit off. His body couldn't really understand that it's not a life or death situation. So understanding those situations, things like getting sick, we just have to stress dose, so we just add some more meds to the mix. But if there's a certain point where, say, he's having too much diarrhea or something, it's likely we'd have to end up just going to the hospital to get him an IV drip. He'll be better after that. So again, all of these bits and pieces, they just kind of we can see it all come together now, and it's called, I don't think I mentioned the name, so it's multiple pituitary hormone disorder, and which is also known as hypopituitarism, and they use those interchangeably, I think, because the first one is really hard to say. Like, there's all these names, so many names. But yeah, understanding all of that and the adrenal system, and it was like, whoa, it all makes sense. But for our son, his hormones just aren't doing what they should do for him. His testosterone levels look okay at the moment, and then as he grows up, they'll just keep monitoring that, and it's likely, maybe not, but most likely he'll need help to go through puberty as well. So we've got an awesome specialist. Like, she is epic. We love her a lot. She'll follow him as a kid. So once he becomes an adult, he'll move to an adult endocrinologist. But we're seeing her and the nurse every 3 months. We kind of interchange, and they check his bloods, see how he's going. He gets a scan of his hand every year, I think he will. And then, he'll be on the treatment plan for his thyroids, his growth hormone treatment, and his adrenal insufficiency for life. It's just that the levels might change. So when he passes the most growing stage as an adult, there should hopefully be less dosages. So the growth hormone, I should mention, that's thankfully it's a weekly shot now. We thought we were in for a daily shot, but it's, hopefully he doesn't mind me saying this, but a needle in the butt cheek, and we have to rotate every week, and so
left cheek, right
cheek. And he loves putting his Band-Aid on it now.
Cute.
What was it? We were at a playgroup.
What a trooper.
Oh, he's such a trooper, and he's bouncing back so quickly now. It's obviously not comfortable. But he prefers that I do the shot and that my husband holds him, gives him a cuddle. But we were at a playgroup recently, and he had a Band-Aid. I think he got his immunisations, and I was like, I'll show you Band-Aid to the lady running it. And so rather than pulling up his sleeve, he went to pull out his pants, and she's like a really good friend of the family, but I was like, oh my god, I forgot that there was a Band-Aid on his butt.
That's so cute.
Because they're like, why is he pulling out his pants? I'm like, oh no, that's where it should be.
You're just flash a child, just whipping out a butt cheek.
It's so cute, and we've got the really cute ones. He's awesome like that, and he has to wear a medical band. So that's something I think I'd like to share more awareness about, is the medical bands, because we didn't know what they were really until Leo. So it's a really cute one. It's got dinosaurs on it. I think we've got a train one as well. But it basically tells anybody in the medical field, or even a first aid officer that might accidentally be out there, that there's something wrong with him, and that he needs to have the steroids shot straight away if you found him on the side of the road in a car crash or something. He has to wear that all the time. Emergency management plan, and the shots. So it's a lot of bits to carry, and I think we've figured out how to take them overseas. As I said, we have to take them on board. But at least I've got a cute bag to put it all in, and
and you're not going to Bali. Bringing all those drugs back.
I know. Well, my husband's like, God, we don't want to be like, because I wanted to take extra of the steroid meds. It's like they're steroids, and she's like, I don't want us to get done for trying to smell the steroids. I'm like, oh, come on, it's like a child.
They are prescriptions, so you would be fine, but
and we've got letters and everything. But it's so true. We're like, shit, even when he wants to do sports in school, apparently some schools care that you need to have a letter to prove to the other kids, the other parents, that he's not doing that for enhancing reasons. So
that's crazy.
There
would be people out there that would.
And
absolutely.
That's what the specialist said. So she usually works with a lot of kids that are a little bit older. There's not many kids we know in the area, or even in Queensland or Australia, that have this condition. It's not totally rare, but it's rare enough that we know maybe there's one or two other toddlers we might meet soon, hopefully, to just kind of have them all in the same room and get to know each other. So that's been an adjustment. It's an adjustment that my husband and I, we just kind of kept on keeping, and we totally ignored the fact that our lives had changed that much. I think a lot of it's to do with I was going back to work at the time. I was still postpartum, my husband working full time. So, and we had these two, little boys that are just non-stop, so they need us. And around that time, when we got the diagnosis, I kind of put a time limit on my head. It was like, after we find out what's wrong, we know it's not cancer, we know that we can treat it, and we kind of knew what we were in for, maybe I'd feel better.
Yeah.
Because I definitely, the past 4 to 5 months, I noticed I was just not myself.
Yeah.
I didn't really want to leave the house that much. Leaving the house was feeling like a fight or flight experience.
Yeah.
I didn't fully realise that until I reflected on it all. I was forced to. But I didn't fully notice how in the pits I was.
Yeah.
And that my husband, in his own way, was just doing the best he could.
Yeah.
And then about a week after we got the diagnosis, I went, I don't think I'm okay.
Yeah.
And I think thankfully because of the community we're in and kind of the space I'm in of trying to understand that, and much more understanding about maternal health and mental maternal health.
Yeah.
I did go, I might do a panda test, like the online panda test, just to see, maybe I'm going crazy. I did it, and it was like, yeah, you should definitely talk to someone.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have a great GP. She's a woman herself, and she's a great, what we call it, great grand doctor. So my mum walked into that GP when she had a pregnancy test and I was the one that she was pregnant with.
Oh, wow.
And was like, I need a doctor, I'm pregnant. And she
Yeah.
was unexpectedly pregnant. And so this wonderful lady happened to have a kid. I think my GP had her son a year before me.
Oh,
and so they're like the same age.
Yeah.
And we've grown with them, and like our whole family sees her. So she's epic. And so I felt like I could be comfortable in going to her and saying, I'm not okay, I don't think.
Yeah.
And we kind of we've reflected on that appointment since, and she said, you were a totally different person that day. And after the appointment, I thought I was sorted, I was like, okay, cool, I'm not okay. And we worked through, you obviously want to try and get some movement into your lifestyle, things you enjoy. I did start medication because I was like, yep, I need something to help, especially with getting through with all the Leo stuff at the moment. Not something I'd done before.
Burden.
Yeah, but again, I was just in denial, I think.
Yeah.
And
maybe it's also about your baby.
Yeah.
It's not, you feel like it's not your time.
Yes.
They're the priority. They're the ones that need the love and the emotional support and things like that. So you do kind of just get through it.
And I think that's the only reason I went to see her, actually, because I went, at the time, it wasn't about me. It wasn't for me. It was, my kids need me. My husband needs me. And I was like, cool, left that appointment. I called my mum and she had no clue that I was... She went, oh, yeah, we thought you were a bit different kind of thing, but nobody could really say it to me or pick it because I just tried to fake it till I made it,
Yeah.
And anyways, went to that appointment, so started that and was like, okay, understanding that I'm not okay, but then I just kind of picked up and moved on and thought I was doing well. I have to give a huge shout out to my hubby for that day when I told him. He said, thank you for realizing that you might need help. The way he said it was just, I'm here for you, I'm holding space for you, whatever you need. He didn't know at the time how to support me or support himself, but he was just so there for me, which was amazing. But in the month that followed, I guess it was a lot more fragile. I recognised why I was so tired and why I just didn't have, didn't want to get out of bed or wanted to go to bed as soon as we could. And so the load that I was carrying for the family, I started dropping because in hindsight, I was totally just starting to slip.
Yeah.
And then we went on this beautiful trip out to Goolawah, where my hubby's brother lives, and we were camping on the Brisbane River, like the most beautiful scenery, so quiet, and I was like, oh, this feels wonderful, but I just feel like I can't catch a breath. I was like, okay, that's weird. And that morning my hubby's like, are you okay? Like, it seems like you can't catch your breath. I was like, yeah, I just had my son sleeping on me all night. I thought maybe, I don't know, my lungs were a bit shorter from that. And I don't know, that the feeling just kept going. And then again, we were loving the day, having a really good time. But by 2:30 the next morning, I woke up and I was like, I feel like I can't breathe. I had to sound dramatic to my husband, but I can't breathe. And he said, you having a panic attack? What could I possibly be panicking about? Like, this is the most chilled I've felt.
That's it though, isn't it?
And I was like, how do I breathe? I was going, oh crap. Okay, the hospital is like, it's 10 minutes drive to the house. And then from the house, it's another 10 or 15 minutes to the road. And then from the road, it's another 20 minutes. It's 2:30 in the morning. It's pissing down. That would be a nuisance. Like, mum brain going, no, I probably should, but I'll just see how I go until the morning. My sister-in-law had a puffer, and I borrowed that during the day just to kind of help with that. Never had a puffer before. So I got my hubby to get that for me, and that, I think it helped, but I think it also didn't help. But then I felt this urge to get my youngest and just like sleep, to lie down with him and sleep with him. And now I realise that kind of calmed me down. I went to sleep, woke up the next morning, still couldn't catch a breath fully. And I'd never had that feeling of not being able to I don't know, it's hard to explain. When you can't fully catch the breath, you're like, wow, breathing seems so easy, but when you can't do it, it is terrifying. So I said, I might go to the hospital just in case I have this again tonight. Like, I don't want to have my lungs not working, whatever it was. So after breakfast, my hubby and I went to Kilcoy Hospital, cutest regional hospital you'll ever see. And he sat in the car waiting, and my in-laws looked after the kids. And I turned up there, and I was still in denial at the time as what was going on. And when I explained my symptoms and what had happened, they're like, okay, so what's been happening recently? And I kind of filled them in, and they're like, so I think this is pretty clearly a panic attack. And they said it in the nicest way possible, but again, I was still in denial. I was like, no, my lungs aren't working. Like, no, your lungs are at 80% capacity. They're great. You are healthy. But your nervous system is shot. And the doctor that was on that day, I was so thankful to have her there. It's funny, she got like curly brown hair, darker skin, and she looks probably like maybe 10 to 15 years older than me. So I felt like I was looking at a reflection. So when she said, from experience, you need to deal with this now, I feel like I took that opportunity to, it was like this, almost like permission to go, okay, well, fuck. If this woman, who is a doctor in this regional setting, looks like she's got her shit together, is saying to me, she's had something similar when she was a mother, when she was in her early ages. And my doctor, my GP, had actually mentioned that she had postpartum depression after her second. If these big, powerful women are able to tell that to me and are trying to nudge me in the direction that they wish they could have gone or they did go, I'm like, fuck, I really need to sort this out now. And at that point, I still thought it was for the boys and for my husband. I now know it was for me as well, and then that's really important. But yeah, they gave me a week doctor's certificate to take off, and I'm like, oh, I need a week. And then
6 months later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was that day, that panic attack was the 1st of May, so really easy to remember. But yeah, it was, again, I called my parents after that, and I think it was a slow burn. They were like, oh, okay, so that happened. I'm like, yeah, that happened. Still in denial. I swear, I was still in denial for how long? But the next couple of weeks I did take the first week off, and then I took another half week off. And my workplace was great. My boss, he basically told me him and his wife had been through the pits before when they were younger. Different situation, but he got it, and he was just so considerate and understanding. I didn't feel the pressure from them to run back into it, even though the boss of the company was having to do my role. Like, it was amazing to be that supported there. So I had that support, and then I had to start accepting support from my mum, from my in-laws, from my friends, to keep the boys going, like to keep the family running, and to not put that on my husband, because I was so fragile. Like, I'd never felt that fragile before, mentally. And physically I wasn't feeling great either, but my voice started going funny, and I thought it was because I was sick, but it wasn't. It was my adrenal glands were just fucked. And I had to learn how to swallow and breathe properly again without thinking about it. And so those physical reminders were probably a positive thing in a way, because they reminded me that I couldn't just get back to it and try to push through. And it just became this sort of uncoupling of figuring out who I am now, who I want to be, who I thought I was. It was all of this sort of weird self-discovery, throw it all in there and see what comes out when I'm at the bottom and coming back up. And I don't know, it's actually been an awesome journey since then, but I've learnt a lot, and I'm still going to be learning a lot. And I've done therapy as well, and kept seeing my GP. My chiro has been helping with like diaphragm work and being able to release stuff, and giving me information on the vagus nerve, which is really handy for anxiety and that sort of stuff. And I'm actually sort of doing these sessions, which is like energy coaching, with this lady who does a lot about matrescence, which is a word that I came across a couple of years ago, didn't fully understand, but I realise now this is my matrescence transition at the moment, and that I've given into it, and I'm fully understanding why I've changed, how I've changed, throwing in also my son's health journey, and knowing that we want him to be able to navigate that in the best way possible, and that we want to have the right language around it, and how can we be telling him or trying to encourage him to look after himself if we can't look after ourselves. So it's just this whole like, it was just like an explosion. I don't know. Feels like a reset. And it was a lot, and it feels like it was a long time ago, but it wasn't. But I just feel like I am the person I've always wanted. I've been working towards the person I always wanted to be. I have just kind of shed that skin of pretending that I have my shit together, the mask that I had been wearing, because when I told a couple of people about what had happened, they went, what? Like, we would not have expected that to have been an issue for you. And so being honest was one of the biggest game changers for me, and just being open now, especially, again, like we just have this mirror of my son's journey, and if we're happy to tell people about what's going on with him, and have language around that and be able to navigate that properly, it's got to start here. And so for my husband and I, it was really rocky. We didn't think it was rocky at that point, but I was just not myself. I was a shell of myself. He was busy, really quite stressed at work. And so between us trying to navigate all of that, like we'd lost each other. We were still there, and we knew that it was a season, but I just feel like that hospital trip after that, we talked about him, because the doctor kind of said, how's your husband coping? And I said, I don't think he's coping, but he's doing the best he can because I've dropped the ball so much. And yeah, the conversations after that were really hard for about a week or so. And then getting emotional thinking about it, but coming through the other side, I just feel like the two of us now, we're in this together. We've connected more than we've ever connected before, and just the conversations we're having are amazing, and I feel like it's a really good example for our kids as well.
I think it's a huge deal that your husband has been vulnerable. Yes. It's not easy. I mean, like some men it is. For lots of men, my husband is not good at opening up. No. He doesn't really think about things. He doesn't think about his emotions. So I think that the fact that your husband has been able to obviously go through this journey with you as well, but come out the other side and still want to be like there for you and with you is a huge asset to him. Absolute testament to him. But even for him, he knew he was reflecting on things where he realised he wasn't okay the week before this happened, like before I had my panic attack, and we kind of started talking about this, but he just didn't know how to say that. And obviously I was in my own bubble, so I didn't even notice that, he was feeling so burnt out and overwhelmed as well. So yeah, it was really shitty. Like I remember that I think it was the day he went and talked to somebody to that sort of set me into almost another anxiety attack, because he didn't know how to put words to that. And it's not because he didn't want to tell me. It's just that as a man, especially, like that whole toxic masculinity is that
he didn't want to talk about it because if he did, he'd probably cry. And so, again, for me, like how I've grown up, for me that felt so weird for him to not be telling me that. But I had to sort of take a moment to realise that that's what he wanted to do, and I had to just let him be in that, and that we were in this together, and that eventually he did start to tell me sort of, you know, it was the stresses from work and obviously all his Leo stuff, and then not knowing how to support me, like all of that just kind of combined. But yeah, being like allowing ourselves to kind of have this journey on our own terms, but at the same time, has been important, and understanding how the mental load, the thing that I'd love to talk about now, and the thing that mums need to understand is that women, mothers usually carry that mental load so much more heavily than men, and it's something that society just kind of goes, here it is, take that, and you're still figuring out how to be a mother, how to be this person that you're changing into to look after these humans, and then you throw that on it, and we all just kind of keep on keeping. We don't really stop and go, okay, well, let's just acknowledge that has happened. That not only have I changed physically, I've also gotten this whole other load on my brain. And so understanding that also impacts partners as well.
Have you read the book? It's by Dr. Libby Weaver, Rushing Woman Syndrome?
Yes, I've heard about that.
It's incredible. Definitely recommend it. Read it. It's so good. Talks about all of that and cortisol and everything. And we're the first generation that's had all of these pressures to work, run a household, raise children. Like, our parents didn't have that pressure. Some of them did, but we are the first generation to be doing it all, and no wonder we're fucking struggling.
Exactly. My GP said that. She like pretty much said, like, this generation, my generation, your generation. Yeah. Basically said, you're fucked. Yeah. Because there is just that, it's just so much pressure. And then throw in social media. Like, that's can be a positive
cost
thing.
Of living, buying a house.
Everything.
Yeah.
Holy shit. So, it's just this whole storm that, for us, we've sort of come out the other side. And for me personally, and how I've been showing up, I used to be the sort of person that would not try to fix people, but I've always been more of that motherly figure. I've kind of had to be.
Help.
And people have always like looked to me for that. But I've had to really kind of step back and go, okay, how I want to show up as a mother is not how my mother had to show up, and that she was always very, you could tell, like I know now that she was very stressed. The mental load would have been really heavy. She didn't have the language around that because, again, they didn't know. Yeah. It's that whole thing of like, now we know better, we're going to try and do better. But throwing all of that into the mix, I didn't want to show up like that. It was draining. I was becoming that person that couldn't communicate what I needed or what somebody could do to help me. And so I've just kind of gotten really, really bloody honest with everyone around me. And from that, I guess there's been kind of little ripples within that, whether it's other mum friends or the mums that we see out in the community, or even my family. And my kids, like I can tell the relationship with my kids has just gotten so much better because I'm more present. I'm just more, vulnerable and honest and a totally different me. But I feel like even though it was an absolute shit show and we've still got Leo's condition that we're going to have to manage for life, I just feel like it's been like this beautiful restart that I want to make sure that not just for us, for our family, but anybody that I know that that is around me that hears this, that talking about it and being real and not wearing a mask, if you feel safe enough to do that, it helps a lot with all of the above, with the mental load, with being a mother, with being a human, with the anxiety that I have had, I think, for quite a while, but never was pushed to the brink where my nervous system shut down. So that's a really long way of saying that's my story.
No, it was beautiful.
But yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure as well.